let's jump straight into one of the questions I got from one of my patrons. Actually, someone who's in one of the higher tiers of the Patreon. So they get access to live Q&A with me every month, and sort of also one-to-one time online too. But she had a question about transcriptions and writing transcriptions down. We started this discussion about writing transcriptions down or not writing transcriptions down. And it is actually something that a lot of people, especially classical musicians, have questions about or want to talk a lot about, because I think that, well, first of all, the word transcription does actually mean to write down something that was a sound, I guess. This is a very bad dictionary definition of that, but in fact, I'm going to just check out the dictionary definition of transcription. Transcription, a written record of words or music. Hey, there you go. So we often talk about transcription when we're talking about learning jazz, and I think people often take it literally, and they think, well, it has to be written down if it's a transcription. It doesn't. The main thing that needs to happen with jazz is we need to listen to a lot of it. We need to use our ears to start to understand the music and what's going on with it. And that's sort of what transcription does. It, first of all, helps us find material via the solos of other people and how they have learnt to solo and how they look at the chord sequences that we're playing over. But it also just sort of helps us start to use our ear as well. So it really does two things. It helps us find material, and it also helps us helps us use our ear. Now, do we write it down when we transcribe? So say your teacher says to you, right, you got to transcribe a whole Stefan Grappelli solo. The question is, do I write it down? The answer is sure. If you want to write it down, and if that's going to help you learn it, then write it down. I think that people can be a little bit too dogmatic about this question. I, for example, probably used to be like that. But I, for example, don't like writing down transcriptions because that's not how I learn. It's never been how I learned. I actually find learning via visual aids just doesn't really help. I find learning by ear a lot easier, but that's because of just how I am and just sort of how I've learned the violin over the years. If you are like a dyed-in-the-wool classical musician and you're wanting to get into playing jazz, you want to try and make the process as easy and as enjoyable as possible. Now, so if you find learning via reading is the best way for you, then you should do that. That's what I think. I think that it's important to do it the way that it feels right to you and the way that you enjoy it the most. But the main point here is that the written part of it shouldn't be the goal. So our goal is not to have a written out solo. Our goal is to learn the solo or to learn the material from the solo. Hey, maybe you don't want to learn the whole solo. Maybe you want to transcribe the whole solo and then learn little bits of material and use that material. But that is the goal. The thing to remember is the goal is not to have it written down. The goal is to take material from it and to use our ear. However we do that, it's up to us. It's absolutely fine to do it your own way. Do it the way that you enjoy it. But see the written down music as a sort of means to an end. The end being you've taken down some material via your ear and you've sort of learned it. I can tell you exactly how I do things. I will spend a little bit of time just listening to some stuff that I know that I like. Quite recently, I was like, I really like Lee Konitz's playing. I'm just going to listen to an album of Lee Konitz. And within about a couple of minutes, I was like, oh, this is so nice. Oh, I know this tune. Ended up getting my violin out and started hearing little lines that I really liked. What I did then was I transcribed probably maybe 30 seconds of his solo. When I say transcribed, I took it down, I learnt it by ear, spent a load of time slowing it down on YouTube. and listening to the little area that I enjoyed the most, practicing it, then sort of tried just like messing around with that within an improvisation over that tune. So sort of putting it in the same place, and then sort of messing around with the backing track, putting it over the chords. Then I end up transposing it to different keys, transposing it to like a bunch of different keys. I quite like doing things in thirds, minor thirds or major thirds. I can't remember if I did that with this one, but that's my process. Then what I feel like is I sort of start to understand this little piece of information. Then that was just with one little line. It wasn't with a whole solo. But that's my process when I want to sort of take down small pieces of information. You can do the same thing with longer solos, and maybe that would be when you might want to write them down. I don't know. I don't do that, but some people do. Once they'll learn a whole solo, maybe one chorus, then they'll just spend a bunch of time writing that out. Then it's something that they can look back on. It's also one of the reasons some people like to write things down, is because it's just so you have something at the end of your practice. I can't remember who said this to me, but we're human beings, we are material animals. We like to have things, and what can be difficult with learning jazz is sometimes we practice for hours and hours and hours, and we haven't really learnt anything concrete. We might not have learnt a whole tune. We might just have learnt a concept that's all sort of up in the ether and that doesn't really feel super concrete. Whereas if we transcribe, we can transcribe a whole solo or a whole chorus or a whole line and get that written out, and then we can look at that and say, hey, I did that and I made that, and now I sort of know that. That is why some people like to write their transcriptions down as well. So I hope that answers things for anybody who thinks about this a lot, or who has asked this question to themselves or to others in the past. In my opinion, if we want to write it out, then please write it out, but don't see that as the be-all and end-all, and don't see that as the end game.